They shouldn't have invited me. Not out of kindness. Not out of respect. Just curiosity. They wanted to see what a mistake looked like, in a suit. The envelope came on a Thursday, wedged between bills and grocery coupons. Cream-colored, thick paper, the kind rich people use when they need to feel important. My name was written in cursive I couldn't read at first. Inside, gold lettering, floral edges, and one line that stopped my breathing. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Riley Carter and Brent Drexler. My daughter. The little girl who used to fall asleep in the passenger seat of my truck after night shifts. She was getting married. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The house was quiet, always is. The fridge hummed, the ceiling fan creaked, the smell of oil and soap still stuck to my hands. I should have been happy. But something felt off. The card looked too polished, too cold. Like it had been printed for someone else, and they just added my name at the end. The date was 2 weeks away. Lakeview Resort, Tahoe. Black tie. RSVP online. I don't even own a tie. Still, I went. I rented a suit, cheap, a little too tight in the shoulders. Shined my old boots till they almost looked like dress shoes. Drove 6 hours north, parked behind a line of Teslas and imported sedans, and walked toward the building that looked more like a museum than a wedding venue. Inside, everything smelled like money, lilies, champagne, and polished wood. People moved like they were performing for invisible cameras. I recognized no one except my daughter. Riley stood across the room, laughing with her fiancé's parents. She looked grown. Calm. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. Like she belonged there. I didn't. When the usher handed me my name card, I saw it right away. My name, Marcus Carter, printed neat and centered. And beneath it, in a different pen, darker ink, Father, by obligation. The handwriting was sharp, almost deliberate. Someone wanted me to see it. I didn't say a word. I just took my seat at the family table, next to people who didn't even pretend to hide their judgment. One woman glanced at my shoes and whispered something to her husband. They both smirked. Across the table, a guy in a tech vest stared at me like I was the entertainment. When I reached for the bread basket, he made a joke under his breath, something about the janitor getting a promotion. I heard it. Everyone did. But I didn't flinch. You learn over time that silence cuts deeper than any insult. The ceremony was perfect. The speeches were long. Every word sounded rehearsed. When they called for family photos, no one asked me to join. I stood at the back, near the exit, pretending to check my phone. Then dinner. Laughter. Toasts. Cameras flashing. And me, the background. It should have ended there. But it didn't. When dessert came, I saw it again. Another card, tucked beside the napkin. The same handwriting. Try not to spill anything this time. That one hit harder. Because it meant they'd talked about me before. Someone, maybe the groom's father, maybe even Riley's mother, had shared stories. About the man who cleaned schools and fixed boilers. About how he didn't belong. The laughter got louder. I could feel eyes on me, though no one looked directly. It's funny how cruelty hides behind good manners. I stood up slowly, pushed the chair back without a sound, and walked out. No scene. No words. No goodbyes. Outside, the air felt different. Colder. Cleaner. The lake shimmered under the lights. I could still hear the music echoing behind me. For a second, I almost left quietly. But then I saw Riley, through the glass doors, still smiling, still perfect. And I wondered if she even knew. If she saw the note. If she heard the jokes. I wanted to believe she didn't. I turned away, walked toward the parking lot. My truck looked out of place among the luxury cars, but it was mine. Every dent had a story. When I opened the door, I heard the microphone crack inside the hall, a sharp pop, like feedback. The music stopped. The crowd noise dipped. Then her voice. Clear. Calm. I'm done, Riley said. I froze. The next sound was a shuffle, gasps, confusion. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. Just standing there, barefoot now, holding her heels in one hand and the mic in the other. I'm done pretending, she said. Her fiancé tried to grab her hand. She pulled away. We're leaving. People laughed, awkward, nervous. They thought it was part of the show. But she walked straight down the aisle, white dress brushing spilled champagne, eyes locked on me through the glass. She didn't stop. Didn't wave. Just reached the doors, pushed them open, and said one thing. Let's go. I didn't ask why. We walked out together, father and daughter, past photographers, past whispers, into the night. 40 minutes later, the music was still looping from her phone, the same wedding playlist she'd spent weeks building. I reached over and turned it off. She didn't stop me. The road was dark. Her makeup was still perfect, but her hands shook on the wheel. She didn't look at me when she said, I saw the card. I turned slowly. When? Last night. At the rehearsal dinner. It was already on the table. And you still went through with it? She nodded once. I had to see it with my own eyes. The tires hummed against the asphalt. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she exhaled. You always said silence is a weapon. Teach me how to use it. I looked out the window. The lights of Tahoe faded behind us. They already taught you, I said. She gripped the wheel tighter. So what now? I looked at her reflection in the glass. No, I said. We make them remember what quiet men can do. And that's where it began. They thought I walked away. I was just getting started. My house isn't much. One story, peeling paint, a fence that leans more every winter. But it's quiet. Paid off. And mine. When we got there, Riley didn't move right away. The headlights caught the chipped mailbox, the one she painted when she was 8. It still said, Dad and me, in fading blue. She sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel like she was waiting for something to hit her. Finally, she said, I need you to see something. She pulled out her phone, scrolled, and hit play. The video was shaky, recorded on a phone at the rehearsal dinner. The sound was too clear. Someone had filmed close enough to hear everything. The groom's father, Alan Drexler, leaned at the bar, drink in hand. I mean, come on, he said, voice thick with bourbon. The guy cleans floors for a living. I checked. Works maintenance at some college. You believe that? Laughter. Then the groom's mother. Don't be mean. He's not just maintenance. He's custodial staff. More laughter. And then the groom himself, Brent, chimed in. I told Riley she's marrying up. Guess she didn't tell you her real dad's still around, huh? My chest tightened. He grinned in that video, easy, confident. Can't wait to see her face when she figures out she could have had her real father walk her down the aisle. Not the janitor. Someone off camera said, That's cold. He answered, Truth always is. The video stopped. The silence after was worse. I leaned back in my chair. My hands felt numb. They knew, I said quietly. Riley nodded. All of them. Even Mom. She laughed. I looked at her. Her makeup was smudged now, but she wasn't crying. Just staring at the table like she was trying to burn holes in it. You could have stopped the wedding before it started, I said. I tried, she answered. But Mom said to let it go, that we were lucky they even invited you. That one hit hard. But I didn't let it show. Riley took a deep breath. So I finished the ceremony. Then I looked around that room and realized something. They thought I was them. What do you mean? They thought I was ashamed of you. She looked at me then, steady. I married into that family because I thought it would make me safe. But tonight proved something. Money doesn't buy class. And silence isn't weakness. It's aim. Her words stayed in the air a long time. I stood up, walked to the sink, turned on the water. Let it run. It covered the sound of my breathing. When I came back, she'd opened her laptop. "You once told me to keep receipts," she said. Well, I did. On the screen were folders. Names. Companies. Invoices. Email chains. "These are their vendors," she said. "The Drexlers own a logistics firm. Supposed to be clean, government contracts, hospital supplies, all that. But half of these are fake. Shell companies." I traced them. I stared at the names. Gensis Medical. Ortholink Partners. Healthcore Transit. "Guess who signs all the invoices?" she said. "Brent?" She nodded. "And guess who owns the shell vendors?" "His uncle." She looked at me again. "I wasn't sure before. But when they mocked you, that was it. I'm done playing polite." I sat down across from her. "You planning to go to the cops?" She shook her head. "No. Not yet. They'd bury it under lawyers and donations. I want them exposed from the inside." "You used to work on their facilities, right?" I nodded slowly. "Years ago. Back when they subcontracted maintenance through the college." "Why?" She pulled up a file, building blueprints, contracts, payment logs. "Then you still have access. Old clearance codes. Contact names? We'll need them." I stared at her. "We? Dad," she said. "They laughed at you. You think I can let that slide?" Her voice didn't shake. Mine almost did. I leaned back in the chair. "You realize what you're talking about?" "Yes. This isn't a family argument." "I know. This could ruin them." "Good." I looked at her laptop again, the open spreadsheets, the files, the evidence of everything that had been hidden behind glass and suits. "You already started, didn't you?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "A while ago. I just didn't know why." For a long time, we sat in silence. The hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen. Outside, the wind brushed the window like someone testing it for weakness. Finally, I said, "You sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure." I nodded once. "Then we do it right." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "No shortcuts. No shouting online. No revenge posts. We take it slow. We find every loose wire. And when the power goes out, they won't even know who flipped the switch." Riley looked at me the way she used to when she was a kid, and I explained how engines worked. Curious, patient, proud. "What do we start with?" she asked. "Paper," I said. "Always paper first." I stood up and walked to the hallway closet. Pulled out an old metal box, rusted, dented, full of forgotten things. W-2 forms. Tool receipts. Maintenance reports from a lifetime ago. And one brass key, dull with age. I turned it in my hand. The tag was faded, but I could still read the words, Drexler Medical, Archive Storage, Unit B. Riley's eyes followed the key. "What's that?" "Something they forgot to take back." She smiled, small, sharp. "Then let's remind them." That night we cleared the kitchen table and spread out papers, wires, coffee cups. She took the laptop. I took the files. Every page told a story of greed, lies, and arrogance. By 2 a.m., we had our first lead, a purchase order that didn't match its invoice. A fake shipment. A signature that didn't belong. Riley leaned back, stretched her neck, and said quietly, "They thought you were beneath them." I nodded. "That's why they never looked down far enough to see the floor they were standing on." She smiled without humor. "And you're the one who cleaned it." We didn't talk after that. Didn't need to. Outside, the first light of dawn started to break. I looked at the key again, cold and heavy in my palm. It wasn't just metal anymore. It was a map. A reminder. Tomorrow, we'd open the door they forgot existed. And everything they'd buried would come out into the light. Morning came slow. The kind of gray light that makes everything look colder than it is. I didn't sleep much. Neither did Riley. The key sat on the table between us, dull and quiet. I hadn't seen that brass tag in years. Back then, I used it every week to check the storage units where Drexler Medical kept their equipment archives. Old files, spare parts, inventory records. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Until one day my contract wasn't renewed. That was their phrase for, "We found someone cheaper." I poured 2 coffees, black, no sugar. Riley's eyes were red, but focused. She wasn't the same girl I used to drop off at school. She was sharper now. Calm. And when she looked at that key, I saw something I recognized: purpose. "You think it's still there?" she asked. "Storage unit like that? If they still pay rent, it's there. If not, it's probably abandoned." She took a sip. "Let's find out." We drove out of town in silence. The industrial district sat behind a chain-link fence off Route 46. Half the buildings were half dead, signs faded, numbers missing. The world moves fast when you stop fitting in. The lot was empty except for a few trucks and a guard shack that looked like it hadn't been manned in weeks. The padlock on the main gate was rusted. The side entrance was open. Unit B was at the far end, metal walls streaked with rust. I slid the key into the lock. It turned like it remembered me. Inside smelled like dust and paper. Boxes stacked head-high, labeled with black marker, invoices, contracts, maintenance logs. I recognized the handwriting, mine. Riley turned on her phone flashlight. "Jesus," she whispered. "It's all here." I pulled one box down and set it on an old crate. Opened the lid. Inside, neatly bound folders yellowed with time. "See the codes?" I said. "Each one matches a quarter and department. Accounting used to double these for audit backup. If they were hiding something, it'd show up here." She started flipping through. Names, numbers, signatures. She was fast. Analytical. Every few seconds she'd hum quietly, the same habit she had when doing homework as a kid. After a while she stopped. "This vendor, Gensis Medical. Look." The logo was printed clean, but the address was wrong. It pointed to a strip mall in Reno, a storefront that had closed 3 years ago. I knew because I'd fixed the roof leak before they shut it down. Riley pulled out her laptop, connected to her hotspot, and searched. No listings. No tax record. Nothing. "Fake company," she said. "Payments every month. Big ones." "How big?" She turned the screen toward me. 200,000. Repeating transfers. I let out a breath. That's not sloppy bookkeeping. That's theft. We kept digging. Each box told the same story: inflated costs, duplicate invoices, unverified shipments. The deeper we went, the uglier it got. Around noon, I found a folder marked vendor cancellations, pending. It listed several contractors who'd been quietly terminated right after signing service extensions, including me. Riley saw my name and paused. "You never told me they cut you like this." "No point," I said. "I found another job." "They faked your termination reason," she said, voice flat. "It says non-compliance. That's blacklisting." I shrugged. "Doesn't matter now." "It matters," she said, closing the folder. "It matters because they buried you to protect themselves. You lost years because of this." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. We spent the next 2 hours scanning everything that looked suspicious. Riley's fingers flew over the keyboard. Each click sounded like a nail in someone's coffin. When the laptop battery hit red, we packed up the evidence and stepped outside. The wind picked up, dry and sharp. Clouds rolled over the mountains. "You think this is enough?" she asked. "It's enough to start a fire," I said. "But not enough to finish it." We drove back through town, stopped by a hardware store. I bought a small portable scanner and a stack of flash drives. Riley grabbed more coffee. At home, the table turned into a war room. Papers, devices, folders, everything in rows. We worked like we'd done this before. Halfway through the night, I found an old envelope tucked inside one of my own maintenance reports. It wasn't mine. Inside, a receipt from Northern Freight Logistics, signed by someone named W. Drexler. The date was from the year they fired me. The shipment? Medical storage units unregistered. I held it up. Look at this. Riley leaned closer. They used shell companies to move unlicensed materials? Could be. Or stolen inventory. She scanned it, filed it, and whispered, "They're not just greedy. They're stupid." "Stupid gets caught," I said. Around 3 a.m., she closed the laptop. "Dad, if this is real, if it all connects, they could lose everything." "They should," I said. She stared at me for a while. "You're not angry, are you?" I shook my head. "No. Anger's loud. This needs to be quiet." She smiled faintly. "You really believe silence is a weapon, don't you? It's the only one they don't expect." Riley leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Then what's next?" "Verification," I said. "We find someone inside who'll confirm it." Someone tired enough to talk. I already knew who. Back when I worked maintenance at their facility, there was a guy, accountant, mid-level, nervous type, named Joseph Nunez. Always stayed late, always muttered about creative math in the reports. If he was still around, he'd know where the bodies were buried. The next morning, I drove to the Drexler campus alone. Security had changed, but the faces were the same, bored guards, empty smiles. I parked by the loading dock, the same spot I used years ago, and waited until shift change. Joseph came out at 8:15, coffee in hand, eyes sunken. He looked older, smaller. When he saw me, he froze. "Marcus?" "Morning, Joe." He looked around. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for work," I said. "Temporary stuff." He half smiled. "You and every other guy who used to work here. Still doing the books?" I asked. He sighed. "For now." "Still creative?" That made him stop walking. "Don't do this here," he whispered. "Then where?" He hesitated, then nodded toward the coffee shop across the street. 10 minutes. Inside, the smell of burnt espresso filled the air. We sat in the corner booth. "I know you kept copies," I said. He didn't deny it. "If they find out I talked..." "They won't." "You didn't." He looked at me, then at the USB drive I slid across the table. "What's this?" "Proof," I said. "Yours, mine, and about a dozen other people they used." He took it, slipped it into his jacket. "You really think you can take them down?" "I don't need to. I just need to show people who they are." He nodded slowly. "You'll need allies." "I've got one." He glanced up. "Riley?" "Yeah." Joseph sighed. "Smart girl. Tell her to be careful. They play dirty." I stood up. "So do I." When I left the cafe, the sun had just started cutting through the clouds. I looked down at the key still in my pocket, cold, heavy, alive. Everything we needed was in motion now. We weren't chasing revenge. We were building a record. And the thing about records? They don't scream. They just wait, until someone presses play. Revenge looks like rage in the movies. In real life, it looks like paperwork. For the next week, my kitchen table turned into a command post. Riley labeled folders. I built timelines. Every name, every date, every number had to match. No drama. Just math. We worked mostly in silence. Sometimes the only sound was the scanner feeding another page. I could see how tired she was, but she didn't slow down. Neither did I. By Wednesday we had 200 documents, contracts, canceled payments, false vendor IDs, shipping logs that led nowhere. The pattern was clear. They'd been siphoning money through fake suppliers for years. I knew how to handle tools and wires. She knew code. Between us, that was enough. One night Riley said quietly, "If this goes public, Mom will get dragged in too." She knew what kind of people they were, I said. She thought silence would keep her safe. I looked up from the papers. Silence only protects the honest. She nodded slowly. No more questions after that. Joseph kept feeding us small things. Emails, memos, payroll logs. Always through dead drops. A brown envelope left under a bench near the bus stop. A text from an unknown number saying, "Check your porch." He never met us again, but his courage showed in the files. One night, Riley opened a folder and froze. "Dad, look at this." It was an internal memo from Alan Drexler, the groom's father, to the board. Continue using shell vendors until after audit. Maintain hush with former contractors. Carter's dismissal must remain classified as breach of protocol. My name. On official letterhead. She looked up at me, waiting for a reaction. I just said, "Now it's personal." We needed a way to expose them without looking like the ones pulling strings. The wrong move, and they'd spin the story: disgruntled ex-employee, unstable daughter, fake evidence. Riley suggested a failsafe. We release everything only when it can't be traced back. How? She smiled. Through them. She explained, Drexler Medical ran its own internal newsletter, weekly updates for shareholders, automated and pre-scheduled through their email servers. She could queue one extra file into the system, time-stamped, encrypted, invisible until a certain date. When it triggered, every subscriber, including journalists and government auditors, would receive a routine update. Except this one would include attachments, invoices, vendor lists, and audio from the wedding rehearsal. All of it. Clean. Undeniable. I watched her hands move over the keyboard. Calm, precise. This could end careers, I said. She didn't stop typing. Good. But before we set it in motion, we needed one more thing: a witness with authority. Joseph could verify the numbers, but not the intent. We needed someone from inside management, someone who'd seen the orders being signed. That's when I thought of Laura Kim. She'd been head of compliance when I worked there, a quiet woman, smarter than most of the men who pretended to run her department. She quit after they refused to report a contamination issue. Rumor said she moved to Sacramento? Riley found her LinkedIn profile. 2 messages later, Laura agreed to meet. We drove 3 hours, sat in a diner off the interstate. She recognized me instantly. "You look older," she said. "Paperwork'll do that." I told her what we had. Showed her the memo with my name. She didn't look surprised. "They've been covering this for years," she said. "But if you want to burn them down legally, you'll need to hit the audit division. Their system runs quarterly self-checks. If your data slips into that window, it becomes evidence they can't erase." Riley asked, "Can you help us?" Laura hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I kept my access token. Old habit. I can open a door for you, but you'll need to walk through fast." We shook hands. No promises. Just understanding. Back home, we started timing everything. Friday night, Laura would send the access ping. Saturday morning, Riley would upload the encrypted files to the audit system. Sunday 6 a.m. The internal newsletter would auto-distribute its quarterly update. 3 days. That's all we needed. Those 72 hours felt longer than years. Every noise outside made us look up. Every phone vibration felt like a siren. On the second night, Riley said, "You ever think this is too much?" "No. What if they come after us?" "They already did." Saturday, 11:47 p.m. Riley's screen showed the Drexler medical dashboard, rows of codes and timestamps. Laura's credentials worked. "You're in," I said. She nodded, copying files into a hidden directory labeled Q2_audit review. Each upload made a soft beep. When the last one finished, she exhaled. "That's it." I looked over her shoulder. "No. One more thing." I reached into my pocket and slid a USB drive onto the desk. "The audio," I said. The recording from the rehearsal dinner. Their jokes. My name. Every laugh. She hesitated. You sure? I nodded. They mocked the janitor. Let the janitor speak. She dragged the file in. The progress bar crawled. 90%. 99. Done. The system confirmed the schedule. Distribution, Sunday 6 a.m. When it was over, Riley sat back, eyes half closed. What now? She asked. Now we wait. Feels strange, doesn't it? What does? Knowing we've already won, but they don't. I thought about that. It's not winning. It's balancing. Outside, the street was empty. No cars, no music. Just the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the wall clock. At 5:58 a.m., the first email went out. We didn't see it, but we heard it happen, phones buzzing, one after another. Notifications lighting up screens across the city. By 6:10, Drexler Medical's website crashed. At 6:12, local news feeds started reposting the attachments. At 6:15, the board locked access to all servers. Too late. Riley looked at me, wide-eyed. It's out. I nodded. Now comes the noise. We stepped outside. The morning air was cold and clean. Somewhere downtown, alarms started going off, maybe in their offices, maybe just in their heads. I took the brass key from my pocket, turned it in my hand one last time, then dropped it into the storm drain. That's done, I said. Riley watched it disappear. What happens next? Nothing, I said. We go quiet again. She looked back at the rising sun. They won't. Let them scream, I said. The louder they get, the guiltier they sound. That afternoon, news broke everywhere. Fraud investigation at Drexler Medical. Anonymous source leaks internal evidence. Audit division confirms data breach. On the screen, the anchors read my name from the memo. Not as a suspect, this time as a witness. Riley muted the TV. They'll come after us anyway, she said. I know. You ready? I've been ready since the day they called me a janitor. She smiled just once. Then we wait. When the sun went down, we sat on the porch in silence. No victory speeches. No toasts. Just quiet. In the distance, sirens cut through the air. Every empire falls the same way, one paper at a time. They thought silence made me small. They never understood, it's what made me dangerous. The first 24 hours after the leak were chaos. I didn't see it on purpose, didn't open the news, didn't scroll. I didn't need to. The world always catches up to truth faster than it thinks it will. By Monday morning, Drexler Medical was on every feed. Government contracts frozen. Shareholders demanding emergency meetings. And Alan Drexler, the man who called me, custodial staff, was standing in front of reporters, blinking in the camera flashes, saying words like misunderstanding and targeted smear. Riley sat at the table with her coffee, laptop open, watching him talk. Look at his hands, she said quietly. He's shaking. I didn't look. He should be. She turned the sound down. You think they'll trace it back? They'll try. But they'll find nothing. Laura's credentials are retired. Joseph used his home Wi-Fi, not his work account. The newsletter came from their own server. Every path leads inward. She smiled faintly. Like a maze. Exactly. I'd built mazes before, in wiring, plumbing, conduit lines. You learn how to guide things so they move where you want, without ever seeing your hand. This was no different. By Tuesday, 3 board members had resigned. The CFO disappeared. On personal leave. The audit division confirmed irregularities. The Drexlers went silent. Their house, the big white one on Pine Ridge, got surrounded by cameras and news vans. Riley watched from her phone as Brent tried to push through a crowd. He looked smaller than I remembered. Do you ever feel sorry for him? She asked. No. Even a little? I shook my head. Sympathy's how they got away with it this long. She didn't argue. That night, we started cleaning up our own traces, deleting backups, burning old notes. But one thing stayed on the table, the original folder from the storage unit, the one marked vendor cancellations, pending. Riley flipped it open again. You sure you don't want to keep this? For proof? Proof's already public, I said. This is clutter. She looked at me a moment longer, then nodded. We fed each page into the metal trash bin behind the garage. Paper curls faster than people expect. It burns quick, but quiet. When the last sheet turned to ash, I said, That's it. Wednesday morning, someone knocked on the door. 3 times firm. Not the police knock. A different rhythm, patient, professional. Riley looked up. You expecting someone? No. I opened the door. Laura stood there, wearing a windbreaker and a calm face. They found me, she said. Who? Internal security. They've been asking questions. I didn't answer, but they know I helped. Riley joined us in the doorway. Are you safe? For now. But they'll start calling you next. I smiled faintly. They won't. Laura frowned. Why not? Because I sent them something this morning. Her eyes narrowed. What? A little insurance. A report addressed to the Federal Contracts Office, from their own legal department. I filled it in with dates, signatures, and the phrase knowingly falsified. Riley's eyebrows lifted. You forged it? I shook my head. Copied it. Word for word. The template existed, they just never thought anyone would use it. Laura stared at me. That's not revenge. That's tactical warfare. I shrugged. You can't fight clean against people who built their careers in the mud. She sighed. They'll implode. You realize that? Good. She handed me a card. If things get worse, call me. I'll deny I said that. Understood. When she left, Riley said, You scare me sometimes. I scare myself sometimes, I said. Thursday came with headlines. Federal inquiry into Drexler Medical expanded. CEO Alan Drexler under review for fraud allegations. Anonymous sources confirm internal whistleblower cooperation. The machine was running on its own now. We didn't have to touch anything. The truth was self-propelled. That evening, my ex-wife called. First time in years. Her voice was tight. What did you do? Nothing. You destroyed them. They did that. Riley's name is all over the news. She didn't hide it. You could have come to me. I did. You laughed. Silence. She whispered, Do you hate me that much? No, I said. I just stopped listening. I ended the call. Friday morning, a black sedan parked across the street. 2 men in suits sat inside, pretending to read. They didn't knock. Didn't need to. Riley noticed. Think they're from the company? Maybe. Or maybe the feds. Either way, we stay still. We didn't turn on the lights that night. I sat in my chair, listening to the clock. Riley typed quietly beside me, cleaning the last traces from her system. When she finished, she leaned back. So this is it? No, I said. This is the part where they start to beg. It happened the next day. Saturday, 3:42 p.m. The phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before picking up. Marcus, the voice said. Alan Drexler. I didn't speak. I know it's you, he said. You think you're clever, but you've destroyed lives. You've ruined my son's future. Still nothing. Listen, we can make this right. If you come forward and say you were misled. Click. I hung up. He called back. I let it go to voicemail. His voice cracked halfway through his speech. By the 5th message, he was cursing. By the 7th, he was pleading. Riley listened to one of them. He's scared. He should be, I said. By Sunday, the board had voted to suspend all Drexler operations. Federal agents raided their offices. The same cameras that once filmed their parties now filmed their downfall. I watched none of it. I was in the garage, fixing the old water pump. Oil and rust are better company than chaos. When I came back inside, Riley was sitting on the floor, laptop in her lap. "They're saying someone from inside leaked the files," she said. "Good. They're guessing it was Joseph. He can handle it. He knew the risk." She looked at me. "And if they figure out it was us?" "They won't. And even if they do, they'll be too busy surviving to prove it." That night I couldn't sleep. I went outside, sat on the porch, watched the neighborhood lights blink out one by one. For the first time in years, the air felt still. No weight on my chest. No noise in my head. Just quiet. Riley came out with 2 mugs of coffee. "You think it's over?" "Almost." "What's left?" "The part they can't control." She frowned. "Meaning?" I looked out at the empty street. Public memory. Once people see you for what you are, there's no coming back. Not with money. Not with lies. She nodded slowly. "So we don't have to do anything else." "Exactly." We sat in silence. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, then faded. They'd finally stopped laughing. Monday morning, I opened the mailbox. Inside was another envelope, white, clean, expensive. No return address. Just one card inside. It said, "You win. Please stop." No signature. I folded it once and dropped it in the trash. Winning was never the point. Truth was. And truth had already done its job. When men like the Drexlers fall, they don't crash all at once. They sink slowly, the sound of wealth drowning in its own silence. By the end of the month, their company was gone. Frozen accounts. Lawsuits. Federal hearings. Half the employees scattered to competitors, the rest clinging to what was left of their paychecks. Alan Drexler resigned. For personal reasons. His wife stopped showing up in public. Their son Brent, the groom who mocked me, vanished from social media entirely. The last anyone saw of him was a grainy photo leaving the courthouse, sunglasses on, head down. Riley watched it once, then closed her laptop. "He looks like he aged 10 years. I didn't answer. "Some things don't deserve commentary," she said. "They're selling their house." "Good," I said. "Let someone honest live there for once." The investigation dragged for weeks. Reporters knocked. Emails came. I ignored all of it. The noise had served its purpose. Truth doesn't need an encore. Laura sent one last message. "It's over. They'll be indicted." No attachments. No signatures. Just those words. Riley read it and smiled, small, quiet. "That's it, then." "Yeah. Feels strange." "What does?" "Finishing something without fireworks." I looked up from my coffee. Real endings don't explode. They fade. She thought about that, nodded, and went back to her screen. 2 weeks later, she packed a small bag. Not the kind of leaving that hurts. The kind that means you've finally built your own road. "I got a job offer," she said. "Data security firm in Seattle. They help expose fraud cases. Guess I've got experience now." I smiled. "They'll be lucky to have you. You'll be okay here?" "I've been okay for years." She paused at the door. "You're not going to say you'll miss me?" I shook my head. "That's implied." She laughed softly. "You're impossible. Runs in the family." She hugged me once, quick, tight. No tears. Then she drove away, leaving behind nothing but dust and the faint smell of coffee. When her taillights disappeared, I sat on the porch for a long time. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. The Drexler's story stayed in the headlines for months. Senate hearings. Press conferences. Alan claiming ignorance. Lawyers claiming administrative oversight. But the internet never forgets. Every time they tried to rebuild, that recording from the rehearsal dinner resurfaced. His laugh. My name. The jokes. People replayed it in comments, in articles, in news compilations. 14 seconds of arrogance, preserved forever. I never watched it again. Once was enough. One night Joseph called. I hadn't heard from him since the leak. "They're done," he said. "Indictments came down this morning. Fraud, embezzlement, obstruction. The works." "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah." They questioned me. I told them the truth. Nothing else to hide. "Good." He paused. "You know they think you were the mastermind, right?" "I'm fine with that." He laughed quietly. "You really don't want credit, do you? Credit's for people who need to prove they mattered." He didn't have an answer for that. Before he hung up, he said, "Riley's name won't be mentioned in the hearings." I made sure of it. "I know," I said. "Thanks." Winter came early that year. The air smelled like rain and metal. I spent most days in the garage, fixing engines for neighbors, patching things that didn't really need fixing. It gave my hands purpose. The radio played news in the background. Every now and then, they'd mention the Drexlers. Fewer words each time. Fading. Forgettable. That's how it should be. Riley called once a week. Never about revenge, never about the past. Just work, the weather, small things. I liked that. Normal felt good again. She told me she'd found a small apartment overlooking the water. "You'd like it here," she said. "It's quiet." "I like quiet," I said. "I know," she answered, smiling through the line. Around Christmas, a letter came in the mail. No name on the envelope. Inside, a check. $10,000. The memo line said, "Maintenance consulting fee." No sender. No address. I didn't cash it. I burned it. Some debts are better left unpaid. In January, I drove out to the lake where it all started. The wedding venue was closed for renovations. Through the gate, I could still see the hall where it happened, the lights, the glass, the place where they laughed. Snow covered the ground. The air was still. I walked down to the water, stood where my truck had been parked that night. The same view. Same cold. I took out a small envelope from my jacket. Inside was the original wedding invitation. Cream paper. Gold letters. Faded now. I tore it in half, then half again, until it was just flakes of paper in my hand. The wind took them across the water. That was the last piece. On the way home, I stopped at a diner off the highway. The waitress looked tired but kind. She poured me coffee without asking. "You from around here?" she said. "Used to be." "Work in the area?" "Not anymore." She smiled. "Lucky you. Everyone's been talking about that big company scandal. Drexler something. Whole mess." "Yeah," I said. "Heard about it. Guess karma's real," she said. I looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah. Real enough." When I got home, the mailbox was empty. The porch light buzzed. The house felt smaller, but lighter. I poured the rest of the coffee into the sink, turned off the radio, and sat down. No more plans. No more noise. Just quiet. That night I wrote one line in my notebook, nothing fancy, just a truth I'd learned the hard way. They thought silence made me weak. It made me precise. I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the dark settle. A year passed. Time doesn't heal much, it just dulls the edges. You stop counting days, stop replaying voices. Things that once felt sharp become background noise. The Drexler's story ended quietly. No trials on TV, no speeches. Alan took a plea deal. His wife filed for divorce right after. Brent moved to Arizona under a different name, started some small logistics startup that never took off. They still owed millions in restitution. Their mansion on Pine Ridge was auctioned last spring. The news showed strangers walking through it, opening drawers, running hands along marble countertops like tourists in a museum of arrogance. The listing called it A fixer-upper with potential. I smiled at that. Riley didn't come home much after she moved to Seattle. She didn't need to. She'd built a life. A real one. The first time I visited her, she was waiting outside her office building, glass, steel, nothing fancy. She wore jeans and a jacket, hair tied back, no makeup, no armor. "Still like coffee black?" she asked. "Still do." We sat by the pier, 2 paper cups, one quiet world. She said, "You ever regret it? What we did?" I thought about that. The silence between questions is where truth usually hides. "No," I said. "Do you?" She shook her head. "Not even once." Then, after a moment, "Sometimes I dream about that night. The wedding. I keep waiting for you to walk in and yell, or throw something, or… I don't know. Do what normal fathers do when someone insults them. I'm not normal." "I know," she said, smiling. "That's why it worked." We didn't talk about the Drexlers after that. There was nothing left to say. Instead, we talked about work, neighbors, weather, things that didn't bleed. I told her about the old water pump I finally fixed, about the neighbor's kid who wanted to learn welding. She told me about a woman at her job who'd been covering up missing funds, and how they caught her. "You like catching liars," I said. "I learned from the best." She said it lightly, but it stayed with me. Back home, life became simple. Mornings were coffee and silence. Afternoons were repairs and long drives. Nights, just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the sound of rain on metal. Sometimes I'd walk to the edge of town, to the old industrial yard. The storage units were gone now, demolished, replaced by a parking lot. The brass key I'd dropped a year ago probably rusted under the asphalt. Good. Let it stay buried. People in town stopped asking about the Drexlers. New scandals came, new names. The world moves on. It always does. But sometimes, when I pass by the grocery store, I still see copies of that old newspaper headline taped to the window. "Drexler Medical Exposed in Federal Probe." The paper's yellowed, curling at the corners. Nobody notices it anymore. Except me. One evening in March, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a leather notebook. On the first page, in Riley's handwriting. "You always said silence keeps you honest. I guess I'm learning." Below it, a clipping from a magazine article. "Whistleblower program expands nationwide." Beneath the headline, a photo of Riley shaking hands with a senator. I stared at it for a long time. Not pride, something quieter. Relief, maybe. Inside the back cover, she'd slipped another note. "For when you're ready to tell another story." I set the notebook on the table, next to the cold coffee, and stared out the window. The street was empty, the air still. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destroying anyone. It's about cleaning up the mess they made, so no one else has to. That's what this was. Clean up. I stood up, walked to the porch. The evening light fell soft across the yard. The fence still leaned, the paint still peeled. I never fixed those things. Some scars are meant to stay visible. They remind you where not to walk again. Across the street, a boy was riding his bike too fast, trying to make the corner without slowing down. He fell, scraped his knee, looked around to see if anyone noticed. When our eyes met, he straightened, wiped the dirt off, and kept going. Kids learn early: you fall, you get up, you keep quiet. That's how men are made. Later that night, I sat in the garage. The smell of oil and dust filled the air. The same radio that once played their downfall now played old country songs about work and time. I wrote one last line in Riley's notebook before closing it. "They laughed at the janitor's daughter. Now the world listens to her." I closed the cover. That felt like balance. When I turned off the lights, the garage fell into darkness. The metal tools on the wall caught the last thin line of moonlight, silver, clean, sharp. No noise. No chaos. Just quiet. And that's where I leave it. Because real revenge isn't loud. Subscribe if you liked the story, new episodes every day.